Hi there, and welcome to the Skylight Books author reading series. If you'd like to learn more about us and our many upcoming author events, please visit skylightbooks.com, where you can browse our inventory, buy books, and join our Friends with Benefits Club. You can also follow us on Twitter, Tumblr, and Facebook. To speak to a real live bookseller like me, please call 323-660-1175. Thanks for your support, and enjoy.
I just got back. I just came to the States 3 weeks ago, and all this, 10 months while this book was being made, I can't tell you how supportive and wonderful Unnamed Press has been. Olivia and Chris, thank you so much, and you guys should be seriously very, very, very proud of yourselves. I'm very proud to be represented, and I know Adam is by Unnamed Press. And thank you, Skylight Books, for having us tonight. So let's have a round of applause for all of them. All right, so we did rock, paper, scissors, and I guess I'm going first.
I think so. She won.
So. I won. So I am going to read a short excerpt from my novel, The Body Myth, that just came out February 26th of this year. I'm not going to give much context. It's an odd little story about a grieving widow in a fictional city in India. She meets a woman named Sarah and her husband Rahil. And Sarah is chronically ill, and she, starts to get rather entangled in their lives. And that's actually what the book is about, but the excerpt I'm reading is about her husband and how she lost him, which kind of sets up her history as she enters the book. Ketan and I, a succinct version. Let me confirm one thing now, because it's simply true. Love is only romantic when you've lost it, or if you can't have it. In the end, I lost my love. Eventually, the pain and vulnerability and howling grief were drowned in the bitterness and boredom that only insomnia can birth. But was Ketan a love before he died? Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, said romantic love and marriage could never be experienced in the same lifetime. This is why we humans perpetually suffer from angst, or rather a running between two conflicts, an oxymoron, two things that can never be at once. Heartbreak arises only when you've been stupid enough to expect anything as a given. A happy marriage that lasts 50 years, children who grow up and don't die before you, or a promotion that comes every few years. Heartbreak only comes from expectation. I had a naive, awkward, gentle expectation of Ketan, that he would be with me until I was old, that I would probably be the first to die, that he, if anyone, could bear the brunt of losing me. Mundane office love stories are the most predictable of all. They only exist because people like us forget how to express our desire to live and love beyond the walls of conference rooms and meetings where glances can be exchanged. Ketan and I were the sort of people who thought social bonding was employing a chai break to talk about a coworker with smug judgments, or moments of joy were heaped upon the everyday baseline of light traffic, 3-day weekends, and the candied HR emails that urged us to keep leading and achieving our goals. He was a project manager. I was leading internal communications. I've forgotten the main purpose of the company we used to work for. There were far too many experts, far too many divisions for anyone to form a cohesive image of the entire company and its place in the world. I barely had an idea then, much less now. Still, I controlled its intranet, sent out firm-wide updates, and helped the interns resize images. Maybe it's precisely because such a cog in the machine that allows you to fall in love in the first place. If you are trapped in mundanity, it's impossible not to latch your poor soul to something or someone that makes you realize your vulnerable pumping heart will only beat a certain number of times, no matter how clean the air is inside those air-conditioned walls. Ketan carried himself with a gentleness I've seen in no other man. He had a beard 5 years ahead of the trend and a make-you-believe-in-God smile. Yes, the fucking charming smile cliché. Expectations, after all, are made of cliches. I developed a crush on him the first day in the office, at which time I had already been at the company for a year. I came up to him with an unnecessary and largely irrelevant question. He never called me out on it and was quick to find some kind of legitimate office connection to justify us loitering by each other's cubicle most of the day. We both came from conservative enough families, but we were no prudes. We took off to Pondicherry the first 3-day weekend we got. We went to French cafes, grabbed beers, and ate spicy seafood by the beach. We got right down to sex in the hotel, no qualms, though he was my first. I never asked if I was his. I assumed I was. He made love by searching for something through the act. You could feel his confusion, his need to express something locked in by his body. In exchange, I made love by letting him find his own answers. I stroked his hair, whispered into his ears, easing his anxiety. One morning, he lay on the bed after sex. He rubbed his beard and grinned. The grin disappeared and his mouth puckered in thought. It's like I have so much more to do. Then he got up and went to the bathroom, came out, and asked me if I wanted to explore Oroville. We married 8 months later in a simple ceremony. His parents, my father, our friends, and a majority of our office co-workers were present. We bought a 3-bedroom flat 20 minutes from our office. Ketan said that it wouldn't be long until it took 40 minutes to get there. We're crawling all over the city, multiplying like insects, aren't we? He said. So far, all our expectations were alive and well. Our work days, our lunches, and our dinners together, our friends on the weekends, our lovemaking at night, such basic expectations. 7 months later, he died in a really stupidly common accident. At a spot equidistant from the house and our office. It was a 2-wheeler accident. A 2-wheeler not because we couldn't afford a stupid car, but because it was the faster way to move through the city. And his helmet was shit and it cracked. Still, nothing happened to his head. His middle section was run over, resulting in a massive internal bleeding. What a bunch of shit the body is made of. It's put here on earth to take emotional bullets all day, all night, but one thud, a bit of force, and the body immediately gives up. Bleeding, bursting, rendering itself so fucking useless. When I was brought to the morgue to see him, I had only anger and disgust for the human body. What a horrific joke. What a silly, stretchy, fragile, untrustworthy thing it was. I started screaming. I pounded his chest, his fucking stupid bleeding-ass stomach that couldn't seem to have gotten its act together in time. I smacked his face. I screeched, "You fucking idiot, get up. Why are you so weak?" I never got to see his cremation. My father had me drugged and kept me in a hospital room, lurching in and out of consciousness for a week. Each time I woke up, my father would come up to me and coo soothing words that jumbled together. He kept telling me to rest. Friends came in. They talked to me like I was a geriatric patient with Alzheimer's. Like I had no idea what had happened, when in fact I could remember every little insult I had screamed, every little word I had said to Ketan's dead body. My anger was only artificially tamed. I could feel my body being medicated, like a hot water bag on top of a raging, crampy menstrual tummy. I wanted to laugh at the doctors and their medication. What idiots. Like I didn't know what was there, like I couldn't feel what was inside of me. I couldn't act on it. Because my lids fell, they stretched across my face and covered my entire body, like cling wrap. I was a butterfly in a cocoon made out of my eyelids, and it felt damn good. Later, I was put in a recovery home for 6 months, where we had collective goals, where we talked to warm, self-aware therapists. Appa called it the farm. I ate upama every morning and drank Mosambi juice every evening. It's also where I read Sartre's Nausea and Kafka, and about feminism, the Enlightenment, and everything in between. I soaked it up, thriving in privileged absurdity and philosophy. I still have no idea why a humble recovery home offered such a wide array of European Enlightenment and existentialism. Stacked shelf upon shelf, it seemed like an inside joke by the founder of the place, who was dead and whose children had promptly sold it off to a private company. Like most European men, I too found myself in exile, and like them, I would survive. I would obey Albert Camus and honor the freedom I had every day. It worked. One day, about 6 months after my arrival, I felt so free that I saw the innate absurdity of authority crumbling at my feet. They said I was 110 kilometers from the city. I went to the office and told them that I was free. They said I needed to contact my father. I told them I was 29 years old and I couldn't possibly need my father's permission. They said they could offer no transportation. I had no phone, only theirs. I'll walk home, I told them. They only nodded their heads. They didn't believe me. So I walked righteously toward the gate, where a scrawny watchman saw me coming. He very methodically checked the latch on the gate. I told him to let me out. He only said, "Madam, no, madam, no." So I walked up to the gate and unlatched it. I was kind of surprised that the guard made no other attempt to stop me from leaving the farm. He just stood there frozen on the side, looking past me as I walked toward the highway. I guess when someone sees a person who's truly embraced her freedom, one can only be stunned into a fleeting temporary realization of one's own invisible chains. Don't you think? Thank you.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Rheea and I have been traveling together for like a week now,
Yeah.
kind of. We were in Portland and then San Francisco. And can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, cool. Thank you. And now here. And so it's been a pleasure to read your book and then hear you read it. It's been really fun.
Thank you.
I am going to, so this is my book, We Can Save Us All. The quick version of it, and I'm going to read from kind of toward the end, so I'm going to give a little bit of setup. I don't think you need a ton for this section, but it's about a bunch of students who are at Princeton University together in the escalating days of climate change, and instead of going to class, they decide to move off campus into a geodesic dome and start what becomes an end times cult based on superheroes and fueled by psychedelic drugs. Yeah. When we pick up our intrepid travelers here, the three main, there's a bunch of characters. I won't get into all of them. The three main ones that you need to know are this guy Matthias Blue is this sort of charismatic but very unhinged figurehead, leader, CEO, founder type guy of this group, and they live in this dome that they call the Egg, that he is kind of the benefactor of, and his superhero persona is Ultraviolet. His kind of counterpart on the operational side is named David Fuffman, and he's kind of the main lens through which we see the events of the book, and he's kind of the COO operational, guy behind the scenes. His superhero persona is Businessman, and then the third kind of point in that triangle is Haley Roth. And she is sort of the main kind of marketing, CMO, brand marketing person who's kind of like elevating what they're doing. She also has gone through a very horrifying thing that happens to her in the first semester of her freshman year. This all takes place during one school year, and it's during a Halloween event. She's wearing a Captain Crunch costume, and because of the backlash against her after some stuff happens, the awful college nickname committee decides to call her Captain Cunt. She then takes back that name, and her superhero name is Captain Cunt, and she kind of owns that. So if you hear some of these names that show up, just trust that there's a little bit of context and lead up to that. So they've been planning a bunch of these bigger and bigger spectacles on campus. This movement has spread across the campus and is now spreading to other college campuses. We're picking this up in March, so this is kind of, maybe halfway between when we've started doing this and the spectacles that they're doing are getting weirder and weirder and kind of crazier and crazier. Let me take a drink real quick. Okay. So I'm going to read for about 5 minutes. David had to order the telephone booth special from a Rec Room supply catalog. Up in the Frist campus center, he stood at a bay window wearing his three-piece suit and wireless headset mic. He stared down at the old-time phone booth on the Princeton campus, his arms crossed like a foreman surveying his factory floor. He was Businessman. Their latest spectacle was set, and David searched the courtyard below for his parents. Earlier that morning, after he gave them a tour of the Egg, his dad and Haley hit it off, comparing cameras and spouting film theory to each other, Art versus artifice, verite, truth, the uncosmeticized human landscape. The camera is the modern means of bearing witness, she'd said, glancing sidelong at David. Yep, Haley still had a lot of rage about Halloween. His little sister Beth was mad at David too, or maybe at their parents. Mom and Dad had left her with Aunt Abby in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It was for her own good, but she didn't see it that way. This campus was no place for her right now, David told her. But nowhere was any place for anybody anymore. The single best video clip of the day's spectacle was filmed by Channel 12's traffic copter, Ultraviolet, on the roof of the Shida Music Building, the campus revolving around him. The still photos, the ones that wound up in Time and Newsweek, those shots belonged to David's dear old dad. The local news arrived late to the scene, in time to catch a few final heroes getting shuttled away in a paddy wagon, but most of the video coverage from the day of the hero came courtesy of cell phone cameras and Captain Cunt's DSLR, which she then sold to CNN for a pretty penny. Flipping through the footage, you'd first find Ultraviolet's striptease. On the roof of Shida, he rips off his collared shirt, swings a cape over his head. He lifts a gallon of Benjamin Moore's mystical grape latex paint, displays it like an infant heir to the throne, douses himself in purple. Next, costume heroes do the old Superman quick change, entering and bursting from the phone booth like hornets from a hive. They head straight for the Shida Music Building, where the plan is for these heroes to commandeer as many percussion instruments as possible. All but one of the members of Princeton's African drumming ensemble were now part of the USV. The USV is the name of the group, the Unnamed Super Squadron of Vigilantes. Unnamed Press. Here we go. All but one of the members of Princeton's African drumming ensemble were now part of the USV, and they wanted their djembes, dunun, congas, and talking drums, which would be a useful uniting force for Echo's human DJ experiences. It also served as a decoy, diverting the attention of campus police from the real heists going on all across campus, where a bunch of non-costumed USVers were pilfering fabrication materials from the architecture building, film equipment from the arts center, bed frames and mattresses and other furniture from the dorms, clothes and groceries from the U-store, and all manner of mechanical and electrical components from the facility's warehouse. 3 goofball heroes even scaled Nassau Hall and stole the clapper from the cupola bell that rang the hours. For good measure, Ultraviolet initially shouted insanities from the roof about being able to fly, being ready to jump, an added wrinkle that forced the police into more of a crisis negotiation mode, as opposed to offensive crowd control. Between his threats to jump, Ultraviolet orated to the USV below. Back in the 60s, there was a popular nonviolent response to police action they called going limp. It's exactly what it sounds like. Do we want to be like bags of trash hauled to the curb for disposal? When the police try to move you today, tense your muscles. Make your body rigid, rooted to the ground. Be still. When they cart us away, they will loft our taut limbs wide as a soaring superhero. Stay stiff. Put the rigor in rigor mortis. Evolve or perish. Businessman watched about 30 costumed USVers get carried away in this fashion before a horde of heroes gathered at the door of Shida, linking arms in a movable clump. Cops realized this crowd was primed to riot, so they went after the leader instead, tiptoeing their way across the roof, nervously wielding the kind of pool skimmer implements used to corral suicidal jumpers. "How do you feel?" Businessman asked into his headset as the cops got their bearings. "Like a cold, sassy tree," said his fearless leader. "How about you?" "Like the fucking Wizard of Oz." Ultraviolet laughed and said, "Pay lots of attention to the man behind the curtain." "Look alive, Ultraviolet. They're coming up behind you. Stay stiff." And he did look alive, so stately up there, 1 foot raised on the roof's peak like a big game hunter resting a boot on a prized boar. Most of the USVers down below, with their costumes and tights and gadgets, they looked a bit silly. Haley had done yeoman's work on fashion design, but superhero garb never looks as good on real humans as it does on illustrated ones. Real people lack idealized musculature. Costumes lack tightness. You can always find a wrinkle. But Ultraviolet somehow maintained the alien bravado of Superman, the litheness of Spider-Man, the millionaire swagger only Bruce Wayne could pull off. It briefly occurred to Businessman, as the cops closed in, that Ultraviolet might fall. But no. Look at him. Balanced on the peak of a roof, and yet this was the most stable he'd ever been. Matthias Blue was beyond clumsy accidents. He was unimpressed with gravity. Thanks.
So it was funny. Your books are so completely different. It was really fun trying to think of, these like some things that are crossovers. And one thing that occurred to me was that you both wrote stories about kind of how an obsession with one woman can really radically change your life. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit how the object of the obsession of the novel, in Rhea's book, her name is Sarah, and in David's book, it's Haley. I mean, in Adam's book, my God, I've projected that you're David.
It's not me, yes.
But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the object of the obsession, how the inspiration for those characters came about.
Yeah. I think, sometimes the people, enter your life at very unexpected times, but they can just completely revolutionize the way you think about everything and make sense of your own world. So, and it's happened a lot in my life where someone can completely deconstruct all the notions you have about your life. And so for me, I think obsession, when you think about obsession, and it obviously it gets to a point of being very unhealthy also in the book, but I think it's a great moment of, letting go of reality and then seeing how we've come to all collectively as human beings agree on some very random rules. So I think that was something that kind of really inspired me with that.
I think for me, I think of it like, we're all secretly trying to impress somebody. Maybe it's our parents or, at different times of life, maybe it's, this person or that person or a boss or whoever it is. And I think especially during college or during kind of early college, at least for David, that person is this woman who has had something terrible happen to her. And I think he very much wants to prove that he is better than, that he's not like those guys, that he's, that he's better than that, and that he's better than himself, or because they knew each other in high school also, so he's better than he was in high school. And I think she's kind of this kind of at first person that he wants to impress, and then I think ideally it becomes much more complicated than that, and there's something less superficial than that going on. But I think it starts with that, and he's trying to elevate himself along with all these people in terms of being a superhero for her.
And I thought about also there's this really interesting role that to some degree spirituality plays in both of your books. And, in yours is this conversation between Sufism in a way and philosophy. Mm-hmm. And then in Adam's book, there's a real, in a way, a religion of drugs, and also in a way a religion of this cult that gets formed. And I wondered if you could share a little bit about, how you feel like maybe your own spirituality influences your work, or how you thought about spirituality in relationship to your work.
Yeah.
Sure. So I was a religion major in college, and I think that was part of it. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I'm fascinated by religions. And I think one of the reasons I'm fascinated by it is that there seems to be like a few that were created a few thousand years ago, and everyone has somehow, in terms of these rules, right? Yeah. Everyone's agreed that those are the only religions, and anything else is a cult. And I think I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what is a cult and what's not a cult, because I think at best some of these groups can just be really positive, progressive, spiritual, traditions that are being formed now or 50 years ago instead of a few thousand years ago, and then someone gets scared, and then the police get involved or whoever gets involved, or it's a legitimately fucked up situation where like they won't let you leave, and and they're preying on people. But there's major religions that are preying on vulnerable people. So. So I think that's sort of where their efforts, at least at a good portion of the book, I think are positive or noble or honorable, that they're trying to develop something that makes sense for their life right now with climate change, with all of these kind of things that they're dealing with. What does spirituality look like in its best possible form, and then what happens when that gets corrupted?
Yeah, I completely second your fascination with religion, because I think religion plays such a huge role in how we are grounded as communities. Like we love rules. We need to have some kind of hope and some kind of idea of how to conduct ourselves in certain ways. But for me, this was a lot about answering some of my own spiritual questions. And I happen to believe that, I think the power of the mind is something that we haven't really, we are very dismissive of in scientific communities. We say things like, the placebo effect, and when it comes to mental illness. But these are real things that are, how people react and respond to their environment during events of trauma, or events of, just, fitting in, and how you kind of like want to find your place in the world. And I think it comes down to, when you think about a cult or a religion, it comes down to trying to find your place in this world. And that's why, some people can be so consumed by it. So for me, it was, I guess I was going through my own questions that I had when I was writing.
There's a great passage in your book where you talk about like Munchausen syndrome,
right,
and how the brain basically like is like, well, you could probably do it better justice than I can, but the fight kind of between the brain and the body.
The brain and the body, and I think it's just, there's so much more merging. Like we say that there's a physical outcome of something, but physically, can be a response of how we're mentally kind of just dealing with the world.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because there's like a real role that secrets play in both of your books, and that like that kind of the things that you're hiding even from yourself, but definitely the ones that are being hidden from you. Or
I just wanted to do that because I have a microphone.
Should we do it together?
Yeah. Secrets. That's good. Okay, cool. Sorry.
Great. I actually, it's funny because I kept thinking, like, how do I ask a question about secrets? Yeah. And I never quite figured out how to phrase it. But so if you guys want to answer the non-question about secrets. Yeah, the topic of secrets. What do you think?
I don't know. How do secrets feature in your book?
I think in a lot of books, the authors are often playing with what does the reader know at a given point in time, and what is that character keeping from someone who needs to know that, and you're like, just tell them, or don't tell them, or whatever it is. But like there's this thing that's kind of like that you're in on as the reader that the other characters aren't in on. So we're kind of tricking you all the time, or trying to. And then it's sort of when to. Because at some point that comes out, or else why do you have that in there? It's just it's like the gun on the wall that never gets used. I think that's maybe what I would say about secrets. That is when to let certain things out to the characters that the reader already knows.
Yeah, I think I was trying to play with the chronology of secrets, because Mira keeps just telling the reader a bunch of things actually throughout the book, but then what I was trying to do was trying to play with the reader and say that, oh wait, that happened then? That doesn't make sense. And like, so the reveal is because of when it happened or how it happened, rather than what it is exactly, because Mira seriously does keep telling you very important secrets throughout the book.
And I'm curious, so Adam, obviously I know you, and we went to college together. This is set at the site of our college. and so I obviously kept projecting that David is you, and even so obviously, and I was like, oh, is this how Adam wishes college went? Like that he'd like started a cult, like or found a cult, and then we'd all like, and then the end of days came, and so could you maybe share like how much of your own self do you feel like you ended up putting into that character or that part, or how much did you not put in?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want I liked how our college went. It was pretty fun. I didn't want the cult. So I think the one area where there's plenty of overlap, I'm sure, but he is not me. And I remember being in like, workshops and stuff like that where people would be like, I don't really like when you did this. And I would have to remind them like, this is a fictional character. I'm having this character make very poor decisions sometimes, knowing that they're poor decisions to create drama. There's plenty of distance there. Hopefully,
you think there's a link between poor decisions and drama?
I do. I really do. And because it's always like, well, don't do that. Oh, he just did that. And hopefully, there's context for it, and it feels earned and all of that. But I wanted to. At first, it was in first person, and I made it into third person on some advice from smart people, mainly so that I could have some distance and allow that character to make worse and worse decisions. But I think the one area of maybe like clear inspiration, well, maybe two. In college, I co-founded this thing called Mima Music. It was this, at first, an organization on campus that we just threw parties. We got some money from the school and would throw parties. It was really fun, but they were with different kinds of music that the campus wasn't usually exposed to, and so we threw bigger and bigger parties. And I think it was interesting to watch this thing start from nothing, and now it's a very noble 501c3 music education nonprofit that's worked in 40 countries, which I can't take credit for that. Other people, took it to a different place. But it was interesting to watch something go from nothing and then build into something. And so then I thought, what would that be like if it was, if there was climate change going on, if there was this sort of pre-apocalyptic phenomena happening, and it wasn't just to throw parties, it was, this group that was trying to really elevate what they were doing, and everyone has a thesis project where it's something that they can use practically to save the world or make the world a better place, not in a magic mutant kind of powers way, but in like a small, I'm going to learn how to grow food with, aquaponics or whatever it is. Just these little things. I'm going to become the expert in this so that when the power goes out for 3 weeks, I know how to do that and I can teach other people. So I think that, and then the Big Bang. We can talk about the Big Bang if you want to talk about that.
Oh, you separately?
Separate, maybe, yeah.
Later. Okay, great.
I feel like that's another conversation.
Yeah. And then Rheea, your book it feels so deeply personal, and there's so many moments in it that feel so almost impossible to have concocted. Like there's this moment that really stung me in a way, like it stayed with me, where our main character learns about something, a really, really big thing about her mother's death from her father. And the chapter ends with the father like kind of tapping his foot to its own rhythm. And that detail, I just was like, wow, it was just, for a huge moment and this huge thing to have landed, and then just to be that tapping. I really was like, I did also wonder, how much did you feel that you drew from your own real experiences, and then how much did you kind of, were you just going in an invention?
I mean, everything in the book is completely fictional, but there is a lot of emotion that I've worked with in different ways, not because of a lot of the trauma that the main character in this book are things I have never experienced, but there are losses that I have experienced, and identity struggles that that Mira is also trying. Mira is trying to validate herself a lot through intellectualism. She reads a lot during her time of grief, and how Adam was talking about impressing another person, and how important that becomes. So for her, when she meets Sarah, she is trying to validate herself to Sarah, because Sarah is somehow a little woo-woo and mystic and mysterious. And I think she tries to, channel a lot of her, Mira needs self-validation, and she's trying to do that by showing off how much she's read and how she shows, how she sees the world through what she's read. And I think I went through a period in my life where I thought that, that's the only way to look at the world. And I think that is the two parts. One is the bookish knowledge of the world, and then the spiritual knowledge of the world, and how actually both are really needed for our human experience to coexist.
I'd love to open it up to you guys. Does anyone in the audience have a question?
Yeah, go for it. Well, real quick, just for everyone, just to try and capture the question. Your question is that, tell me if I'm wrong here, that there are a lot of religions that have been around for thousands of years, and some of the New Age thinking is not as rigorous in terms of the philosophical thought and the rhetoric behind it than some of these newfangled religions or New Age spirituality. That the ancient thought had a lot of wisdom in it.
I feel, see, if you look at me from my experience, what I've seen of the world right now is that you look at ancient traditions and rituals, there was a lot more rituals and traditions that people practiced. And in the last couple of generations, we've kind of lost out on that. We're more individualistic. We are just going. So there is a gap to be filled. And I think what perhaps you're referring to is like a lot of this, the woo-woo new age stuff is actually, if you ask me, an attempt to find a rhythm or something that is sacred again. And I think that, it kind of presents itself in cults and, new age groups. And, I don't know, there's so many words for it today, but I really think it just goes back to the truth that humans like to bond over a certain, sense of hope and a sense of well-being in some kind of way. And, of course, there's so many ways for it to go wrong because, once we start abusing power, then you can take any kind of template and make it a terrible thing. But I actually think that it's a path to us trying to fill in a gap we've lost in these few generations.
And just to play devil's advocate, I think you're absolutely right that there's such wisdom in all of the traditions. I think there's a way of looking at any religious tradition, any spiritual tradition, in a very kind of traditionalist, orthodoxy, scripture, type of way. And then there's the ritual and the direct experience and the mysticism that almost every tradition has. Right. That level of it. And usually in order to be thought of someone who could experience the mystical side of it, you already have to have gone through X number of years of the traditional side, and you have to have read these 100 texts and done all of these things. But I think, that can, at worst, that can be so closing to or so restrictive to especially young people, to say you have to do X, Y, and Z for 40 years before you're allowed into this club. Maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I just want to have a direct experience. And that's why I think when people turn to things like psychedelic drugs or, kind of group, whatever, dance, music, anytime when people are getting together and having a slightly otherworldly experience, they're like, well, that was amazing. What's that all about? I want to follow that because that was not just a great superficial feeling, but there was a connection to some sort of higher power. I want to pursue that. And so I think religion can be really great, but it can be really restrictive. I think the old religions can have a lot of wisdom, but I think it can have a lot of danger too. And maybe the woo-woo thing gets the sort of new age, you hear that and you think crystals and this and that, but maybe crystals are great for someone. Maybe they're like totally creating that connection, and like, I don't get it, but it's amazing for them. And so who am I to say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my question for you both is more about your writing process than about the stories themselves. We all know writers and authors are fragile souls. Who feel like they have to have a statement to the world.
A statement to the world?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have your voice. You've obviously found it. Congratulations, Mukherjee. It's a big step. So my question to you both is: was there ever a point trying to find your story that you said, "To hell with this all. This isn't exactly what I want"? Did you have a breaking point? Did you ever want to quit? And then what helped you see it through?
Okay, so the question was, for anyone who didn't hear. Yeah, no, it's a great question. The question is, did we ever, in our writing process, feel like we had a breaking point, or feel like we wanted to quit, or just throw in the towel?
I think multiple times.
Yeah, I'll go hundreds of times.
Yeah.
So my book took 12 years. I started writing it in December of 2005, and it was published in November of 2018. So you can do the math if you want there. But I would like to pretend that like I put it aside for 8 years and then came back to it. But I was working on it pretty consistently during that whole time. So yeah, there was a lot of times where I wanted to quit. I felt like I kept getting closer. I kept getting better responses or more responses from agents or from the different gatekeepers. It didn't feel like it was just I'm getting crickets for 10 years. It felt like I was putting one foot in front of the other every time, and I was chipping away at something. I think if it hadn't felt like that, it would have been harder. But like just those little crumbs of positive feedback, or try changing this and see how it works. Those were really helpful and kind of kept me going. And then support from friends and people to just be like, hey, I know you're bummed right now that you've been working on this, with this one agent for a year or whatever, and it's not going to work out. Like, shut up and get up and just keep grinding. What was your experience?
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier, that if you're going to be, we're fragile souls, but if you're going to be a writer, you have to be okay with rejection, or at least, it being 90% of your existence. I wrote two novels that I had to trash before this. So that was part of the process to get here. My book, this one that is finally published, was written fairly faster than years, but it took me 2 years to get this out here. But I had two novels before that. That was part of this entire process, trying to find my voice, trying to figure out what story I wanted to say. And I think those were the times that were the hardest, because I was like, this is not going anywhere, and you're trying to query it, you're trying to get interest, and it's not there, and you're collecting form rejections. So I don't know if if you're a writer, you might know this. There's the form rejection, which is just the blatant, it's an automated response. It's just we do not talk to us. And then and then there's the semi, oh, this was kind of interesting, send us something next time, but this is not going to do it. And then you have a really amazing response, which is still a rejection, but it's they'll actually write notes and say, well, I like this and I like this and like this, and maybe you should talk to us later when you've gotten it to a better point or something like that. Still rejection, guys. But there was a point where I was just getting the form rejections. And I think, at that point it was probably the hardest time. But I think if you're a writer, you just have to do it. You keep writing and you keep pushing and you use the rejections as a badge of honor, or not even as a badge of honor. It's just basically if I'm getting rejections, that means I'm still working towards what I want to do.
And I don't know if it's it's certainly not just writing. Before working on this book, I worked on a feature-length film in college that was rejected by 76 film festivals. That's the exact number. I will never forget that number, because that's how many it was, and it was all form rejections, and it was that was also in 2004 when you couldn't send it digitally. I was making VHS dupes and sending them by FedEx and printing everything out, and it fucking sucked. But but it was great, because after you get those 30, the first 30 rejections suck, but then after like we get to like 50, it was like, whatever. And that was really, it thickened my skin so that when I got to this next project, they didn't hurt quite as much and just felt like, well, this is it. And there's I'm sure there's like a cat poster that says this somewhere, but I saw something that said like, wanting to be a writer and not wanting rejection is like wanting to be a boxer and not wanting to be hit.
Yeah,
So,
very much.
Other questions around here? Oh yeah.
Yeah, question for the both of you as well. So, is there a character particularly in each of your books that you identify with the most and why?
The question was, is there a character that
Yeah.
you identify with most and why?
I love Adam's summary of things.
Well,
It just
it's
makes
it's
it
more-
all so much.
It's
No,
more
it's really
for,
good.
for
Yeah.
volume, and podcast.
No, it makes it easier because I space out a lot. So sometimes, yeah, I think there were flip sides for me. There were things that I definitely did not relate to with my main character, but there was a very strong part of her worldview that resonated, and I took from both these characters. They could be like split parts of my mind. Sarah, there's a part of her open spirituality that I'm very compelled by and very like open to the mysteries of the world. And then there's the rigor of Mira, which is like no nonsense, a little bit cynical, which I also use to see the world. And I'm the process in my own personal experience is finding the balance between those two. So I think that's how I relate to my characters because they represent sides of me.
We talked about David already. I think but I think
Who is you?
no, I think he's me at my sort of like most like lame. On some level, like I'm aware of that. I'm self-aware enough to be like, that's what I would be if I just like really, really leaned into the lameness sometimes. But then there's Matthias, who I would think to myself, well, this is kind of like, yeah, he's crazy, but like, if I had the guts to sort of like just like be the rock star person and like go for it, like I kind of could see that. Or I think I like, especially my editor Olivia, who's here, toward the end of the editing process, she pushed me to write about 80 or 100 more pages from Haley's point of view. It was late in the game, and I was kind of nervous for that because it was also right kind of in the upswing of the Me Too movement, and through that process, I got really close to her, and I think I understood more about myself, more about her through that process. So I think all three of them, there's a piece of me in there.
There's one more question. You had a question? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just curious, what was like the first kind of glimpse you had of this story? When did like first hit you? Like, I'm gonna write about this.
When did the story first hit you? I'm going to write about this. I'm just picking up the
Good
cues
job.
here.
Yeah. You want me to go?
Go.
It started as a 3-page piece of flash fiction, which is still kind of the first 3 pages of the book. I had seen a documentary about Hitler called High Hitler, H-I-G-H, and it's about the amount of drugs that Hitler was on in real life during the 30s and 40s. Just a huge amount of methamphetamines and cocaine eye drops and all of these things, which makes some of those crazy speeches make a little bit more sense when you just see him going nuts. He was on a lot of meth. So the first line of the book is even Hitler was on meth. That's been the first line of the book for 12 years. So I saw that documentary and kind of wrote this 3-page piece of flash fiction, kind of extrapolating the idea of what would it look like today, if a very charismatic, very unhinged leader figure, unfortunately we're kind of dealing with that anyway, came to power during all of this, climate change and other sort of pre-apocalyptic phenomenon, and was just very, very drug-addled, but also in control of a lot of people and energy.
The first thing I was, I had this image of the first scene of the book, which is, if you saw someone at a park, and you thought that they were faking an illness to get some attention, and you were not sure, how would that kind of play out? Because your first instinct is to go and help somebody, and then you're also confused by it. And I had this, and that was the start of my story. And I said, I have to see this through. It was granted, it's a really bizarre thing to think about, but that's how my book started. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, when in the creative process, when you write a book, I've never written one, I always want to do. What is the feeling that eventually you want people to take away? What is the key takeaway from both of you,
Ooh.
point of view, that you want people to? I don't know who your audience is. Maybe it's everybody, or anybody just randomly picks it up and ends up taking it home and reads it. As a creative piece that you put outside in the world, you give a part of yourself through that piece. What is that you want people to take away? It could be multiple things, but if you were to identify one thing, what would that be for both of you?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a big question. Because the thing is, what you realize, and this is very recent. Because this book has been out just like a month right now, a little bit over a month, and you realize that it's not your story anymore, because people have all these different interpretations of it, and it's not like I had 100 reviews yet, but whatever reviews I have already seen of the book, you see like, wow, this person read it this way. And sometimes I see it in really great ways, in ways that I expected or wanted. I want people to see the themes of, mental illness and opening up the mind and history and our political realities, which are all things that Mira kind of, comments on throughout the book. So I have to be really open to this idea that it is what people take out of it and how they see the world. But my only hope is that it can allow people to open their mind in a new way. And honestly, that's as honest as I can be about it.
I think my answer, that's a great answer, by the way.
Thank you.
I think my answer is, because that's sort of what I got from your book and the openness. Yeah. Sorry. I think my book's a lot about authoritarianism in a way. It's kind of a small campus version of that, maybe with more costumes and more drugs, but it's still kind of about that. And I think a lot of where this group starts, it's called We Can Save Us All, because it's very much about each individual kind of coming into their own power and being honest about that. In the same way that you just said, you're writing maybe because you have something you want to say. I think everyone has something they want to say, whether it's through a book or through construction or through music or whatever. There's something that you're really good at, and you can, hem and haw about that or make yourself small because you're scared, or you can step up and just be as big as you can be with that, and not wait for someone. So much of our superhero stuff is waiting for the Messiah to come, waiting for some Superman to come, swoop in and save the day, and that's just not going to happen, or at least it hasn't really happened so far historically. And when everyone kind of steps up at the same time, it's unbelievably powerful. And I think when these movements fall apart is when everyone then attaches that power to one person. But if we were able to sort of hold that space and think of that as sort of not the starting point to leading up to giving all of our power to this one person, but all of us just holding that power and supporting each other and kind of doing our thing as well as we can do it, I think we'd be in really good shape no matter what happens to the world. And so I think it's hopefully a sort of roadmap in that way, or could be, but then also a cautionary tale of what happens when you give over your power.
On that note, I had an idea of how to kind of close this, which is, so Adam and I have a history of leading unusual rituals. And I spent this weekend reading all of these two books in by this river. So I thought maybe we, in the spirit of New Age meets Old Age, could close with some kind of thing. So so I was gonna say, if everyone wants to, nothing too weird is gonna happen. I was gonna say, maybe if everyone close their eyes and makes a sound like you're the river. You're the net, you're the river, whatever that's like whoosh, like I'll help too. And then maybe you guys, I thought maybe you could swap books and then just
Wow,
kind
this
of
is pretty
read
mystical.
at random, like some lines that, feel like they're speaking to you. So it's almost like you're reading both books simultaneously by a river. And
It's gonna be more bizarre than my book.
yeah, I think it
That's
might
saying
be.
something. It's amazing.
And then we'll just see, how that goes. Well, don't worry, it won't go on for. It's definitely. I mean, it'll be done within 30 minutes. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay, so audience, we have to do our part. We have to be the river. You can close your eyes, take those breaths, and now we're.
Yeah, sure. That's whispering. Ready?
They made love for the first time in the room while his mother and father were out for a Diwali dinner. Rahil was nervous, kept looking at the door and asking what he should say if the parents were to suddenly come home and ask why the door was locked. But Sarah calmed him down, convincing him that her parents were more Western that way.
Came out the
Too
bottom,
many people in the
figured
family
reasonably
lived away
safe.
from India.
Boiling is
She
what
even
made it
had a
pure.
lesbian cousin
They
who
gathered
had married
round
a
the
French
wood
girl
stove,
in
tied right
Toronto.
through the home
Nothing
like a
could
central
shock them.
artery, vital
If
in life
anything,
giving.
it would be awkward.
David knew about superimposition. Thank you. Thank you, Josephine, so much.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.